Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
And this show, we got our 80s comedy movies for Old Classic. And we each brought a film to the table and put a poll up on the Facebook group. And you guys chose one of the films. And we'll get to all of that. Joe, you got Star Trek 4.
Uh-huh.
And I had Police Academy, the original. Justin brought Airplane. And speaking of planes, you, the viewers, chose Planes, Trains, and Automobiles for the listener's choice slot. So let's get into it with Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
Okay. Well, pretty easy synopsis here. After the event of Star Trek III, there is a strange probe which is basically threatening to destroy all life on Earth, and the crew of the Enterprise decides that since the probe is sending out a language similar to that of humpback whales, but no longer are there any on existence because they were all, going extinct a long time ago because they were hunted to death because save the whales.
Yeah.
They decide
very 80s.
Overtones.
We'll get to that. And so, they decide the only option, of course, is to go back in time and try to get some humpback whales. And this takes them to 1980 San Francisco, and hijinks ensue because 80s. And it really is. It's Star Trek meets the 80s. And I have to say...
I wouldn't say it's the funniest of the 80s films.
Well, that's the thing.
I've seen.
I don't know what you mean.
I wanted to go into this, that I realized that upon doing this, that it is considered to be the one Star Trek comedy, but it's still a Star Trek movie. And to set the tone for how kind of iffy my choice was, they started off with honoring I believe it's the Challenger destruction and the deaths.
The Challenger explosion.
And then
kicks off
the
movie. funny film.
And then leads directly into this ominous probe and killing everybody. And then this dire trip to save mankind. And then about maybe like 45 minutes in, we get to the 80s stuff. And it's pretty funny for a good hour or so. Mm-hmm. And then capped off with a pretty serious ending. So I do think that when it becomes a comedy, it's great. But that's only maybe half the movie.
It was a very Justin pick.
Oh, man.
Really playing fast and loose with the rules. Although you've done that before. Batman Returns as a Christmas movie was a little bit...
Hey, it takes place during Christmas.
It was a little loose as well.
It takes place during Christmas.
Sure.
It's fine. If Die Hard's a Christmas movie, Batman Returns is certainly a Christmas movie.
Die Hard is definitely a Christmas movie.
Oh, okay.
The whole place is a Christmas party.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, yes. It's
the
one
debate
of those,
continues.
As I'm just saying that, so maybe this choice wasn't the best, but I'm still glad I brought it. I still think it is a great 80s comedy, though I don't know if I would say it is like among the best of 80s comedies, if I could say that. But on the whole, I mean, this one is considered to be like one of the best Star Trek films. Actually, of all the original ones before the reboots, it was the most financially successful.
Yeah.
So it really is one of the more mainstream popular ones. It's just known as the whale one. You can put on your time.
So.
Yeah, but Nimoy shows his directing chops, and everybody has great chemistry. Everybody has something to do, which is great. It's actually a pretty smart plot. There's some good jokes. It is dated, but it kind of works because future versus 80s.
Yeah, true.
Makes sense because they're in that time period.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great movie, but I'm curious to see more what you guys thought about it specifically, I guess.
Okay. How about your grade?
My grade? It's not quite... I think that some things are kind of jarring in terms of the shifts in some editing, but for the most part, I think it's a great movie. I leave it with an A.
Okay. Well, it is certainly the funniest of the Trek movies. I'll give you that.
That is true.
Yeah. Now, I saw this in theaters.
Oh.
When I was 10 or so.
Wow.
My dad, big Trek fan, as we know, and it was very funny then. I loved the nuclear vessels gag and the subway and everything else. I think it's a pretty solid Trek movie as well, like you mentioned. I think it does rightfully have its place as those top tier of the original crew, which would be really Wrath of Khan and this.
Yeah, pretty much.
Are the two.
Yeah.
I think Nimoy does do a pretty good job directing.
Pretty good.
I mean, it's not, he's
the
not
best.
Scorsese here, but
hey.
he does a good job for what a Star Trek film requires.
Yeah, you're right.
In the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know if he could direct, well, God rest his soul, he's gone now, but I don't know if he could have directed, the reboot that Abrams did. That was a little too action-y.
Yeah, his stuff.
For, I think, his style.
True.
But I think for what this script called for, it was fine.
All right.
The romance was fine.
It worked.
The characters were all having a good time with themselves. I think it's a fairly accurate depiction of the broad 1980s comical look at the 80s.
Okay.
I could say.
Definitely.
But yeah, I like it as well. It's an A- for me.
Nice. Justine.
I feel like this is the Star Trek movie that really shouldn't be a Star Trek movie, and I feel like today it definitely wouldn't be a Star Trek movie.
Oh, no.
And yet, to many, it's considered the quintessential Star Trek movie.
How about that?
And for me, I think it works because it, A, understands what Star Trek is and allows itself to be playful with it. Admittedly, I think it takes a little while to get going in that regard.
It does.
with many a callback to other movies and trying to be a little bit more morale based in terms of what happened in past events. But it is nice to see the crew kind of off their game for a change, trying to be a fish out of water. And although I don't think every joke lands as well as Nimoy wants it to, it's never really boring, which I have to appreciate. Like I always found myself engaged with the antics and chuckling here and there. I mean, the whole punk scene is probably one of the funniest gags in the whole movie.
That's probably my favorite
Yeah,
part,
I think
actually.
it's great.
Yeah, neck bench is great.
The lack of action, I sort of have mixed feelings about. I'm not saying that
Hey, they get the pirates, you know.
they do have the pirates.
Run from some cops, you know.
Yeah, there's comedic shenanigans. That's for certain.
Yeah.
And there's the infamous great turning into a mannequin scene.
Yeah, one of the more interesting influences of Spock's 60s experiences, I think.
But I mean, it's just that right kind of camp that brings back the nostalgia factor that I think makes it work. Do I think it's the best Star Trek movie I've seen? Absolutely not. But it's good for what it is, and I can appreciate the fact that there's no other Trek movie quite like it. I leave with a B+.
All right.
Oh, I easily think it's one of the best.
Yeah.
Certainly original cast.
Of the original cast, yeah, I mean, there are only... Yeah, of these three, I mean, that would be considered good. Yeah, I suppose
Yeah.
that's correct.
I mean, I can only speak to 4 and 6,
Yeah,
but I like 6 better.
I mean, 6 is my favorite, so I mean, that's the one I enjoy the most. But I guess I just like that style. I guess I prefer more serious Trek anyway. And I think I might even like Wrath of Khan up there with this too. I mean, like I said,
This is a little goofy.
it's a little goofy.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, and I think it works though. It's a very different movie, and I still think it's beloved for a lot of the right reasons.
Yeah.
But I also think that it might not be for everyone. Like I could totally see why someone would say this one isn't their favorite very easily.
Oh yeah.
Well, it isn't much of a Trek movie.
Compared to the rest, I
You
mean,
know.
it stands out. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
Well, I think, as opposed to everything else, it stands out the most as a product of its time. Strictly because everything else takes place in the future. And here, to cash in on, hey, 80s culture is huge. We're in
Woo.
the 80s. Like,
Yeah.
let's
Star Trek's cool,
have them go
guys.
back. Yeah. Star Trek's cool.
Which worked.
Which it did work, like
So,
you said.
yeah.
It was the most profitable up to that point. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with it.
I don't think it was a mistake for them to go that route, but
Oh,
it
no,
is
definitely not.
certainly the most dated of any of the Trek.
But
But
I can't
intentionally
speak to the
so.
motion picture,
But
but
intentionally.
Yeah. No, the motion picture looks like a futuristic movie. So there you go. So it dated in not in the sense of pop culture references. for
Right,
instance.
right.
okay.
Trek
okay.
doesn't usually have that problem. The
No,
new,
that's-
new ones
that's fair.
maybe. I don't know. Some Budweiser. I mean, they got the Beastie Boys now.
Yeah, the Beastie Boys
Yeah.
are becoming a staple of the franchise.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, you don't like that. Kirk was a fan.
It's a new.
I
It's,
mean,
it's a new Trek.
The way they implement it in the new one, I actually really liked.
I did like that, but
Yeah, it was fine.
I'm not. I want. You know what? Roddenberry had a good sense of humor. I'm sure he'd be fine with it.
All right, well, good pick, Joe.
Thank you.
So we move on to my pick, and that is Police Academy. This is the original 1984 comedy, the first of the enormously popular franchise that spawned not only 7 other films, but 2 different TV series, a comic book line, etc., etc. So in this film, there's a shortage of police officers, so the mayor sends a decree for the academy to accept all willing recruits. As such, the group of ragtag recruits cannot be thrown out, and we watch as they drive their commanders crazy, culminating in a riot inadvertently started by one of them. Steve Guttenberg, Kim Cattrall, Bubba Smith, David Graff, and Michael Winslow head up the recruits, while the recently deceased George Gaines is the unflappable Commandant Lassard, and G.W. Bailey is the very flappable Lieutenant Harris. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite comedies. This is one that we watched growing up all the time. It was rated R, so it was dirty enough that, we thought it was titillating. There's nudity in it, but, not so off the track that my parents wouldn't let us watch it. So we stuck to this one pretty close, and as we mentioned while we were watching it, this is the only series I can think of that started out with a very bawdy R-rated film and then became synonymous with, kids stuff. I mean, 3 through 8 are all rated PG. The cartoon series was a big hit.
Weird.
It doesn't happen too often.
Not quite, no.
It would be like if they made a cartoon for kids of Pineapple Express or
The Hangover.
Or The Hangover. Something like that. So I think it's very unique in that sense. Now, the film certainly is dated. I last watched it before we did, probably about 5 years ago. There's definitely a lot of inappropriate jokes, racially, sexually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
Just a wee bit.
But, it's like... We look at all of these movies sort of in context of how they played. Okay, Judy Garland's in blackface. It was awful.
Ooh.
But it was the 1940s and took place in the 1930s, so it's like, okay, it's really hard to watch, but okay. So, this is certainly no worse than that, but there are some references that kind of make your skin crawl a little bit.
There are a couple things that weren't really that funny. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But I think everybody is great in the cast. They work very well together. I think there's a lot of good camaraderie with them. I love Commandant Lassard, George Gaines.
Oh.
Can't believe he just died this year.
Oh my
I believe he was 98 when he passed, but...
Jeez.
Yeah, but he looks like he's in his 90s in this movie. But he's hysterical. And you could see why Steve Guttenberg kind of was a star for a few years there in the 80s. He's very likable. So this is always a favorite of mine. Not my favorite in the series. That would be number 3. But I give Police Academy an A-. Justin, let's hear from you.
Oh, no.
Okay. So a while back, I was watching this interview with a recent comedy director. I think it was one of the gentlemen who did the new 21 Jump Street movies. And one of the statements they said is if they had an opportunity to reboot another franchise, they'd probably do Police Academy and, quote, make it a comedy.
Oh.
I now get the joke. Here's the biggest problem for me with this movie. Police Academy thinks everything it throws out to the audience is hilarious. And it's just occasionally funny. I thought Guttenberg is, for lack of a better word, a jerk. Now, where I will give them credit is I think the cast does have some great camaraderie, and they let themselves have moments where everybody sort of gets their time to shine. I feel like another huge setback in that regard, though, is it feels like there are so many instances where they need to be unnecessarily naughty just because they can, and it's not funny. It's just awkward and kind of obnoxious.
Well, this is the era of Porkies and Meatballs and Stripes.
I never saw either of those, but...
Okay, well, the dirty R-rated comedy was a big deal.
You ever seen Animal House?
Yeah, Animal House started it, really, and then sort of came from that. Yeah.
But I feel like there's an art to that, and Police Academy just has not figured out how to pull that off. I will say yes, there's a lot of offensive humor, but one thing that they did do surprisingly well is one of the worst ones. They actually do address the fact that it is offensive and kind of find a way to counteract it later on, which I thought was actually kind of cool. But for me, it's just...
Well, it wasn't cool to be racist in the 80s.
I didn't say it was cool to be racist.
Yeah,
I said it was cool. They were trying to not play it up as this, not to try to turn it into a joke. But honestly, this just felt like a very, very underwhelming start to a franchise that probably overstayed its welcome. I leave it with a C.
All right, Joe.
Predictably, I'm kind of in between you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I
sensed that.
I thought that some of the jokes were pretty funny. I did find a lot of the comedy pretty good, and I could see how it can form a foundation for a lot of similar films to follow. I actually thought the acting was good. I know Gutenberg's character is a jerk. You're right about that, Justin, but he pretty much always plays that. That was kind of his thing, so I can't really say that's a fault for him. People liked him, I guess.
Cocoon's one of your favorites.
Though, to be fair, he's nowhere near as much of a jerk in that movie.
Okay.
And also, the star of that's Brimley.
Well, obviously. Naturally.
But Cocoon is a great movie with Gutenberg. But I thought some of the jokes worked. I actually thought that it was shot pretty well. I liked some of the costumes considering the budget. But I had two issues with it. I kind of felt that, for one thing, the biggest issue for me is that it didn't really feel like much of a contained story as it did like a various set of
vignettes.
Vignettes and skits, which I thought was cool, but it sort of stuck out too much, more so than I thought it should for something that's supposed to have a cohesive plot. And the other aspect that I thought kind of weakened it too is that I didn't feel like I really knew the characters all that well. Most of them were just there for jokes. Like,
there's a lot of them.
Like there are, but like for instance, the one character, what's his name, who does the sound effects?
Yeah, Michael Winslow's character,
like
Jones.
He has some funny lines, but literally, other than the fact that he does that, he has basically no character.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that bothered me.
Okay.
So I kind of wanted to know these people a little bit more, and Gutenberg's the main character, and he does have like a decent arc.
We know him a bit.
But even for the main character, I felt like we could have spent a little more time with them.
Okay.
So I feel like maybe you could have cut out one or two of the characters that...
Yeah, I agree there's a few too many. And some that aren't really that funny.
Some, you do a couple jokes and you just kind of maybe, I don't know, tweak things down a little bit. I think it could have been a stronger comedy. But I thought when it was funny, it was really funny. So,
agreed.
For me, I'm in between you guys. Leave it with a B.
Okay.
It was pretty good.
Well, as a 10-year-old watching it, it's very funny.
I'm sure it was something.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. I mean, I wonder how somebody in 30 years will view some of the movies, Well, Justin mentioned The Hangover, which...
There you go.
I don't know how you feel about Joe, but I know Justin thinks it's overrated. I think it's a bit overrated myself.
Well, I'll tell you what. I really liked it when I first saw it, much like everybody. But the sequel was very underwhelming, the second one.
What was the same movie?
I was going to say.
Same movie. And upon that, I'm like, this isn't that funny. And then I never had any interest in the third one. So I bet if I went back and watched The Hangover again, I'm sure it wouldn't have the same impact.
That's what I think, too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And maybe this is a product of that. Obviously, at the time, it was a huge success. And they were rolling them out just about every year, too.
Wow.
So it wasn't like look at the budget, Justin.
Yeah.
Well, these aren't heavy effects movies. You could write a draft of this in a couple of days, and
I did like the mob scene at the end. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, but it kind of comes out of nowhere.
Admittedly, it
does.
They
need to give them a reason to be real cops at the end of the movie.
Yeah, and once again, kind of an issue with another skit that has elements of funny, but also kind of dark.
A little bit dark,
in context for. But then I felt the whole movie kind of had an element of dark humor to it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
True. All right. Well, up next is Airplane. Justin?
Can't go too wrong with Airplane, I think.
No, I suppose not. In a send-up to the growing trend of disaster films and a quasi-satirical remake of the 1957 film 0 Hour, Robert Hayes plays Ted Stryker, arguably the 80s name ever, an ex-fighter pilot with a fear of flying, desperately trying to win back the love of his life, Elaine, played by Julie Haggerty, presently serving as a flight attendant on the plane he's boarding. Though when the pilots and passengers fall ill with food poisoning from eating the fish, it's up to Ted to conquer his fear and save the day while enduring all the chaotic lunacy that unfolds. Leslie Nielsen stars as the infamously memorable Dr. Rumack, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has a supporting role. Now, with 80s comedies, let's be realistic here, gentlemen. There were plenty of options to run this month, but seeing as we covered Airport in past seasons, I thought this might be kind of a fun callback, particularly getting some first-hand experience. This was obviously parodying the much later and arguably much more ridiculous sequels that followed Airport, but I think a lot of that still holds water here. What I really do love about this movie that I think is so brilliant is sort of the same thing I think is great about Airport as itself. It's really about the people that sells it. And even though a lot of them are just walking punchlines, there are so many, and they're so... You really got to keep a strong eye to keep up with everything, which warrants so many reviewings. And I mean, rewatches, excuse me. And I think it's a very rewarding experience. The storyline is there, but it's not really the big staying factor. It's the memorable gags. It's Leslie Nielsen having enormously unforgettable puns. It's these scenes that constantly warrant chuckles, and one of the few times flashbacks are actually really useful and complement the scenery. But
Good
Wow.
flashback. Looked here.
Dare I say
They
it,
liked
but-
a flashback.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously parroting flashbacks for exposition, but
There you go.
this is one of those comedies that I think honestly breaks pretty much the majority of storytelling rules, and the result pays off in abundance with a hilariously good time. I live with an A+.
Joe?
Wow. Well, really, I can't really dispute too much of what Justin said. I mean, I think that in terms of satire and spoofing, this is one of those ones that's just iconic for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it sort of solidified Leslie Nielsen as just this hilarious guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, he really steals the show. And I mean, it is a collage of just various puns, but I really like that type of humor. It works for me for the most part. It's a very enjoyable ride pretty much all the way through. And maybe not every single joke works. Maybe some of them are a little too obvious, but you'll have this sometimes. Leave it with an A.
Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned this on a couple of different episodes. The top 5 movies on a plane. We did that once. We also did a overlooked by Oscar, starting with the letter A. Once we wrapped up all of our A Oscars, and I put that on the list as well. I mean, this is a brilliantly crafted satire. This is sort of the touchstone that everything that followed looked at, whether it's movies from the same people like The Naked Gun or Hot Shots, or whether it's scary movies, or even the really bad ones leading into the new millennium with Epic Movie, and really swing and a miss there. I mean, I think a lot of people trying to write those were so focused on funny
Pop culture references.
I shouldn't even say funny gags because they're not funny, but in their mind, funny gags, pop culture references, skits. I mean, this really does have a plot, just like the best of the other ones I mentioned. The Naked Gun has a great plot. Walk Hard has a great plot, which is probably the last really great parody I can think of. But this movie just fires on all cylinders, and the thing that was so brilliant about this, something I've mentioned to you guys, is how the Zucker brothers decided to take classically dramatic actors and put them in this movie. Everybody knew Leslie Nielsen from his cop dramas or from his horror movies that he's done. And here he is, doing the gags, and turns out he's brilliant at it.
He really is.
And, the entire last third of his career was based on it.
Yep.
Everything he did, from, Mr. Magoo to Wrongfully Accused to, a space travesty, many of which I've not seen, by the way. But my personal favorite is probably still The Naked Gun, because that's the one I grew up on.
That's great.
That came out when I was in middle school, and much like Star Trek, saw it in the theaters and watched it numerous times on home video. And I love the Police Squad series as well that it's based on. But this is just a brilliant film. It's an A+ for sure.
There was something I was kind of wondering after I got done watching it for the I want to say it's probably time number 3 for me. This is another case of, does the fandom ruin some of the gags? And even though I think Yes Indeed and Don't Call Me Shirley.
Yeah, I think there's
quoted.
a few of them that are... Yeah. But, I mean, you'll get this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, what I think compensates it is, for every joke that's overquoted and overcited, there's 8 other ones that you can still, throw out to people, and you'll still get chuckles and feel like you're part of the camaraderie of fandom, which I do appreciate. So I don't think the fandom entirely kills it. But it was something that sort of stuck with me. is the fan base a little too dedicated at times?
I mean, I don't think Airplane has quite the fan base as in terms of quotability as a Princess Bride or a Holy Grail.
Well, definitely not Holy Grail.
I mean, and definitely not Princess Bride.
No, Princess Bride comes up.
Come on.
Yeah.
But, other than really Don't Call Me Shirley and maybe a couple of other lines, people kind of just stick to those, even though there's 400 other lines in this movie. And that's what's great about it, is that, you could say to a person, oh, stewardess, I speak jive. Yeah. And, that's something that doesn't get quoted, but anybody that's seen the movie knows what that means.
Precisely.
So, yeah, I think there's a fan base there, but I don't think it's as quoted as certain others.
Oh, that's fair.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. Well, what a pick.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So now we get to our listener's choice, and we decided to do something new this month. Joe had this great idea to throw up a poll on the Facebook group, and the three movies that we brought were all very based in a group. They were very they're ensemble pieces. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay, there you
go. All the movies we chose were ensemble. And so we threw up a bunch of duo movies. We had, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure up there. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was one, 48 Hours. But the one you guys liked the best was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, starring, of course, John Candy and Steve Martin. So, Joe, let's hear about it.
Yeah, pretty much I could see why this one was selected. I mean, if you're talking about classic comedies, this is a great choice. Basically, Steve Martin's character is, as his characters often are, he's a family man who's got to get home to his family, and this time he's got to get home, get a flight for Thanksgiving, but he gets delayed time and again, and he keeps bumping in and forced to be with John Candy's character, who is,
Del Griffiths.
A likable but, potentially annoying guy in a lot of ways, even though he is well-meaning, and Steve Martin, of course, slowly builds into more and more anger and frustration. Planes don't work, trains don't work, automobiles don't work, and eventually you gotta walk home, and it's basically about their journey as they kind of bond while getting on each other's nerves, and it's kind of, I think, not only a comedy classic of the 80s, I think it's kind of a holiday classic too. If there aren't too many great Thanksgiving movies, I guess this would kind of be the one.
Most people run it at Thanksgiving,
and I would say that too. Also, one thing, watching it again, I didn't feel that it felt too dated, actually. Like, it seemed like it was still something a lot of people could relate to. I think both these guys are very funny in their own way, but there's also the sweetness of the movie that I think is great too, and it's also, surprisingly for a comedy of this nature, has kind of this nice build-up to a twist, which I think has a nice moral lesson, which of course most people probably know, but I always thought that was a nice touch. I also think it kind of makes it a little sappy at certain points, which I guess for the holiday season's fine, but I can't pretend.
Kind of a holiday movie staple.
I can't pretend like it doesn't make me roll my eyes a little bit.
It's a little inevitable, though.
Yeah, and maybe it goes on a little too long, certain areas, just a bit, but on the whole, I think it's a great movie, and I leave it with an A.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of the best John Candy movies really don't feel dated. I don't think Uncle Buck is dated. Mm-hmm. I think that's still a great film. I think he always had this great likability about him that made him a favorite for many people. And, certainly always on at my house. My dad was a big SCTV fan. Nice. So anybody that came out of that, was always a star in my house. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, here Candy plays a little bit against type. I mean, he's always sort of the... Yeah, he's sort of oafish, but he's never really, straight up annoying.
No.
And he definitely is at times in this movie, but because of his character, and he really is trying to help out Steve Martin, you sort of forgive that and understand kind of both of their...
perspectives?
Aspects. Mm-hmm. Yeah, both perspectives on that. I think the humor is good. It's light in some places, in some scenes, and then there's some scenes that are just, wildly ridiculous and broad.
Yeah,
like the going one way, on the highway. gag. I mean, that's probably the most broad in the movie.
Hey, I don't know. I mean, I think that was Justin's favorite part. He loved the mess around. He was dying on that part. I remember that.
I'm not saying it's not great. I'm just saying some scenes are lighter than others. It's a little more inconsistent, I think, than some of the other films. But I think it's a great movie. It's an A for me.
Well, I mean, it's hard to deny the legacy of John Hughes. I mean, he knew when to be funny and he knew when to tug on the heartstrings. But most importantly, he knew how to pace it to get the best out of both. And I think this is a shining example of that. To be perfectly honest with you guys, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the score. At times I think it's okay. At others I think it's obnoxiously 80s to the point that it's trying to...
Name the Hughes movie that's not.
It has to be 80s.
Some worse so than others. Like, if it wasn't for the constant parodying of "Don't You Forget About Me," I probably would have been okay with the Breakfast Club's usage of it. But that's a story for another day. For this one, though, I think what really keeps it alive is just how committed they are to these characters and how well written they are as characters. John Candy's character could have been completely obnoxious and forced and desperately trying to be funny, but they make him...
Like Zach Galifianakis in Due Date.
Yes, the very, very bad, sort of, but not really remake of Planes, Trains, but...
Right?
In a way, yeah.
No, it's true, and
I mean, his character, there's just not much to like in it.
No, there really isn't. But this, I think they give him room to grow. They give us... There's a great monologue halfway through the movie, and the twist really does work, and it's hard to hold... I mean, it's hard to not get emotional when it finally hits. Man, tears are shed. But but no, I think it's a solid comedy. I think it's a solid holiday movie. Outside of the score, I think some scenes do run on a little bit longer than they should, which does kind of affect the pacing a little bit at times. But I mean, just by a little tiny bit to hold it back from being one of my all-time favorite comedies. But for me, it's definitely an A.
Wow, AAA.
True. Yeah. Good listener pick.
Yeah,
indeed.
very good
Thanks,
choice.
Folks.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the comedies today, Zach Galifianakis aside, but look at a Rogan as well. I think a lot of the comedies today try too hard to be funny that they sort of forget to create actual characters.
Yeah.
And I think Hughes was a master at that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Any Hughes movie you can find somebody you relate to. Mm-hmm. And, I think that really is what made the man brilliant. And you take two pros like Candy and Martin, and, it just works.
I agree.
Yeah. And Ferris's dad, a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And Rooney's secretary.
Yeah.
Yes.
In one of my favorite scenes. Mm-hmm. The scene that got this movie the R rating.
Well, it's a classic scene now.
So ridiculous and yet so worth the R rating.
And pretty much, Steve Martin in a nutshell, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like, you just hold back until you're waiting to get to that point.
Yeah. I agree.
Though nothing will ever quite top the Father of the Bride hot dog bun rant, I think.
Oh, well, you do love Father of the Bride.
I do.
Joe Month.
Had to drop it, see? Hashtag Joe Month. Make it happen, people.
God. All right. Well, yeah. Good picks all around. I think this has to be the first month where I've given everything at least an A.
Wow, it's a great month.
I mean, these. Well, I'm an '80s comedy fan.
I know
you are.
I mean, I could have brought many terrible ones.
It's basically Dan month.
I mean, many of these are. Yeah, I would say so. All right. Well, next month we're going to throw another poll up on the Facebook. And next month is Epic Movie Month for August. Really,
don't pick epic movie.
Kind of inspired by this. Yeah, don't pick
please,
the movies. Don't. But inspired by the remake of Ben-Hur. We decided to look at some old long movies. So we'll be putting up some of those, and you can vote for your favorites there. And that's it. You can follow us on Twitter as well at Film Fanatics Pod. And subscribe to our channel here if you have not done so. And we'll see you back here for a regular episode of New Movies next time.